On last week's show, we discussed the Black Lives Matter movement. Now on this week's show, we're going to give you the other side of the argument, which of course revolves around the police officers who are involved in the current situation in the United States. I'm Kyle Walker, and this is the Hitting the Wall podcast. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me here on this, I guess, second part of our series on the current events going on here in America. I wish it was a lighter topic, a more fun two-part series, but hey, I'm working with what we've got going on right now. This week's episode of Hitting the Wall is brought to you by a sponsor. We actually have a sponsor. It is brought to you by the law offices of Tel Parrott. If you are in need of a lawyer and you're on the Kansas side, then go ahead and email him at telparrott.com. That's TELPARRETT law.com. So last week we talked about the whole Black Lives Matter movement. We talked about the situation that happened in Minnesota that has led to a lot of the unrest here in the United States. We talked about the situation down in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery. And I just kind of gave my opinion on how things are going. And like I said last time, I can only come at things from what I am, and that's a 40-year-old white man. Okay, never lived a day as a black person. I cannot speak to their struggles. I can only read history. I can only learn from history. The history that is currently right now being completely erased by people who have just gone out of their minds. Okay, and look, I will never once say that the people who are out there erasing history and are going crazy are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Because that's absolutely not the case. The people who are out there right now who are doing terrible, terrible things are the spoiled, privileged little, I was about to say a very bad word, people who have taken their outrage, whether rightfully or not, and on most of the people I see committing the crimes, it is not rightfully outraged. And they are now deciding to use their little progressive ideology to tear down the history of the United States. And I got to be honest, folks, I'm not okay with this. You guys know me. If you've watched the show at all for a matter of time, you know that I am 100% pro-America. I bleed red, white, and blue. I lean a little to the right of center when it comes to our political issues. Not to say that I can't understand and appreciate the ideas from the other side. I absolutely can. I share a lot of them. I would say, though, ultimately, I bend a little right. And I've made no secret about that. So I am pro-military. My grandfather served in World War II. My father served in Vietnam. It was only due to a medical condition that I was not allowed to serve. So I do what I can from the civilian side through a nonprofit here in town called Team Fidelis. You all know this. Okay, so it is not a stretch for me when I see people out there acting a fool to immediately side with the other side. I am 100% pro police officer. Okay, I have friends who are police officers. I have friends that risk their lives every day to keep you and I safe. I will never speak ill of the police force. Now, let's be super duper honest, because that's what we do with each other here. Are there bad cops? Question mark. Yes, of course there are. There are bad police officers. There are bad military personnel. There are bad white people. There are bad black people. There are bad Hispanic people. There are bad people because we live in an imperfect earth, an imperfect world, an imperfect existence that allows evil and bad people to be a part of our society. Is it great? No. Do you want to handle it yourself? No, again. That's why we have police officers. Okay, 99.9% of police officers are out there upholding their oaths, doing their work, keeping you safe, risking their lives. 99.9% of them. And then you get one asshole like you did in Minnesota who does a terrible thing and will hopefully be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Okay, that's what happens. I am not going to sit here and say that every cop is bad, because it's absolutely not the truth. I am not going to sit here and say defund the police because one jerk and again, I just censored myself, I was about to say a lot worse, did something terrible and murdered a black man in Minnesota. Because that's what he did. He murdered a black man in Minnesota. Is that every cop? No. Do I think my guy down in Texas, who's a police officer in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a very difficult place to be a police officer, do I think he's ever going to be one of those people who kills someone and is arrested for it and is going to be tried for it and is going to start racial riots across the country? No, because he's a good person. So already I have one, and you can't say that every cop is bad. I know one that's not. I also know my friend out in Warrensburg, who is a police officer. Is she going to be the next viral sensation? No, because she's a good officer. So we're not going to sit here and say that all police are terrible, okay? Every walk of life has their good people and has their bad people. Unfortunately, it's the bad people that get all the attention. Okay, but day in and day out, police officers put their lives on the line. They stop bad people from doing bad things. They die in the line of duty protecting us every day. So we had one day in May where an officer did something terrible, where an officer flat murdered a person. Okay, the next day, the next day and every day since, officers have absolutely been under attack, 100% under attack. And that's not right. I said on last week's episode that the only way, and again, I quoted an NFL player, the only way that we move forward is if we fall forward together. We're not falling forward together. Okay, this disdain that is prevalent in our society towards police officers, it's not sustainable. Okay, we can't continue on this way. So let's go to let's say one of our more recent current events that just kind of shows us how bad things can be. We go down to Georgia, and this is the situation with Rayshard Brooks. Okay, I'm going to give you my view of the situation. You may feel differently. You may think differently. You can attack me if you want. That does not help. That will not help anything. If you disagree with my with my assessment of the situation, fine. We can talk about it. We can watch the video, of which there is plenty, and we can look at everything that's happened since. And we'll see if we can't agree, we can at least agree to disagree, and we can still walk away with a mutual respect for each other, which is how disagreements are supposed to work. Oddly enough, I know. So we look at the situation in Atlanta with Rayshard Brooks, and there is video to back up what I'm telling you, where we are, again, just like in Minnesota, a business calls police to their place. Okay, so this is not the cops pulling someone over unjustly. This is not the police misbehaving in any way, shape, or form. They are actively called to a situation. A gentleman has fallen asleep in a Wendy's drive-thru behind the wheel. Doesn't sound right. Police officers arrive. I believe there were two of them. They talk to they wake him up. They get him out of the car, Rayshard Brooks. He's drunk, okay? He's on probation, and they bring him out to give him the sobriety test. They talk to him for over 20 minutes. Over 20 minutes. Okay, these were not cops who came to a situation guns a-blazing. They did not subdue him. They didn't do anything for 20 minutes. Again, this is all on film. After 20 minutes, they've decided, I mean, look, the guy was drunk. He was obviously drunk. The breathalyzer said he was drunk. His actions say he was drunk. He could not pass a field sobriety test. He was drunk. What are you going to do? Are you just going to let him get back in the car and drive home? No, he's liable to kill somebody. You can't just put him back in the car to go home. So what do? Now it is time to arrest him. He is on probation. He is driving drunk. He is a danger to himself and others. They go to arrest him. That is where he fights back. The two officers doing their best to subdue him. Does not go well for them. Officer pulls out his taser gun, fires the taser, has no effect. I don't know if he missed. You can't really tell by the video if he missed or I know he was aiming for the leg is what the report's saying. That's what the video shows. He was aiming for the leg, and the suspect is able to kind of shake that off. Lunges at the cops, throws one to the ground, takes the cop's taser gun. Okay, so now a drunken suspect is armed, takes the cop's taser, starts to run. You can see him. He's running. He goes, I think he goes in between a car. This is on film. He turns, he fires the taser at the cops. You can see it. You can see it on the film that the weapon discharges. Okay, and so the police, ultimately with no other option, shoot him, fatal wound, and he dies. That is a crap situation all the way around. Nobody wins in that situation. A suspect is dead. Ultimately not the goal. Okay, ultimately these two cops did not roll up to Wendy saying, I am going to kill someone tonight. No. But it's also a terrible situation given all the unrest going on right now in our society. So these cops couldn't win no matter what they do. But look, the suspect was armed, and the suspect discharged his weapon at the police. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this. The prosecutor down in Georgia who was put in charge, this guy is embroiled in a ton of scandals of his own. He's got a lot of people actively trying to oust him from his position. I think he used this situation to try and say, hey, look over here, look over here, look over here, where he's got all these charges happening over here, or all this, stuff going on against him. So he, of course, stokes the racial flames and says that the officers committed murder. The officer who discharged his pistol and killed Mr. Brooks was charged with first-degree murder. That carries the death penalty in Georgia. So this officer could face the death penalty. Now, there's no way in heaven or earth that a grand jury is going to indict him on a first-degree murder charge. That's just not going to happen. But again, that is what the prosecuting attorney wanted him charged with and wants him to go to court over, is a first-degree murder charge, which is not going to happen. That's wrong. So what he is arguing is that while the suspect was in fact armed, the policeman's life was not in danger. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. A taser is supposed to incapacitate someone. So if the suspect who has a taser gun discharges, let's say he hits the cop is out. What's to stop him from just waltzing over, grabbing his pistol and putting one between his eyes? There's nothing to stop him from doing that. And this is one of my biggest problems with society as the whole right now. Yeah, there are about 20 cell phone videos recording this event and not one damn person lending aid. Like, honestly, I get that everyone wants to be the next viral sensation, but someone eventually could get out and help a person. But that's my 2 cents. Sorry, I digressed a little bit. So every police officer asked says that this is a good shoot. That's what police say. If it's a justifiable use of deadly force, it's a good shoot. And that's what this was. Yes, the police officers' lives were in danger, because if they are tased and they are incapacitated, Lord knows what happens next. Okay, and even about 3 weeks ago, this prosecuting attorney who was working a different case classified a taser gun as a deadly weapon. But now, because it fits his narrative, it's not a deadly weapon. Okay, and see, this is the double standard going on. This is the kind of crap that police have to deal with on the daily. Okay, for one moment something's right, and on the next moment it's wrong. And look, I'm never going to sit here and say that in Minnesota what the officer did with George Floyd was right, because again, the entire world was unified in the fact that that was 100% wrong. Absolutely wrong. It was murder. But in Georgia, where it was a very different situation, unfortunately, the very different situation almost had the same outcome, or actually did have the same outcome, with the sense of injustice. And so that Wendy's got burned to the ground. And they're actually saying that it was Brooks's girlfriend who did it. But of course, police being attacked, people rioting, looting, setting fires, going crazy down there. And this is where things took a turn. This is where what is now being called the blue flu cropped up. Police finally got tired of it. Police, in a show of unity with the officer involved in the Brooks shooting, said, no, charge him with first-degree murder. I'm not coming in. I'm not gonna subject myself to the dangers and the perils of being a police officer just so that you can call me a murderer for defending myself. We're not coming in. And so that night, calls went unanswered. Services didn't show up, and it sounds like it was a complete shit show down in Georgia. And it sounds like that that blue flu, for lack of a better term, that's what it's being called, is spreading around the country because of the way that we've decided to treat police officers in this post George Floyd world. Again, where I maintain one bad cop. You can make an argument for bad cops. The 4 cops who were on that call, 4 bad cops does not equal the whole of law enforcement throughout this country. No way, no how. We need police officers. We need the people who, again, are on that thin blue line between order and chaos. Because without them, chaos will surely take over. You can see what happened down in Georgia. You can see what happened in Minnesota. You saw just rows of burned police cars when they were ordered to withdraw, ordered to pull back. And then we get to the biggest disgrace of them all. And look, if I'm letting my political leanings show, fine. You can turn me off and catch a different episode. Whatever. Again, I'm allowed to say this because I just can't believe this has been allowed to happen. But in this world of make everyone happy and everything has to be politically correct and, oh, everything is great, we have Chaz or CHOP or whatever you want to call it, the autonomous zone in Seattle where the police were forced out and these group of dipshits made their own little community in the middle of, 6 city blocks. This is the biggest farce I have ever seen committed in this country. Do you guys remember, if you're watching my show, you're old enough to remember September 12th, 2001. And you can remember that time where the reverence for law enforcement and for first responders, for firefighters, for EMTs, for police officers could have never been higher. What the hell happened between then and now? Where do we as a society get the gall to take these people who risk their lives and to just constantly crap on them? I don't understand where this has all come from, because I remember the reverence for law enforcement after 9/11. And then I look at this nonsense now, and I talked about the last show. You can look at some of these rioters, and again, not the protesters. The protesters, the people who are protesting with honest change in their heart are doing things right. It's the instigators, and it's the people who just want to yell and scream. It's the Karens of the world who are getting in the face of black police officers and calling them the problem. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It really is. You know, a lot of people are saying that a problem with the police officers is they need to be held to a higher standard. And you know what? I absolutely agree with that. I think the power that they hold within our society, police do need to be held to a higher standard. They really do. Okay, and I think that 99% of those of police officers meet that high standard. Maybe meets and exceeds expectations, and we expect them to be held to a higher standard. A lot of people say they need better training. Do they need better training, or do we need better training? In our instant gratification society, in our I can't do anything wrong society, I'm perfect society, and just our complete self-absorbed society, maybe we, the people, need to be trained a little better. Maybe we, the people, need to understand that without the law enforcement, we are left with chaos. You're seeing it. You're seeing it in all the places that police have pulled out. You're seeing it in all the places where the blue flu has set in. You see it in New York, where their government craps all over them. And 600 officers filed their early retirement paperwork. Okay, so you're going to see a lot more in New York, which is already a dangerous place anyway. And imagine, without a full police force, what it's going to look like. Okay, people want to live in anarchy. Well, I think it's coming. If we keep up this nonsense of hating on the police officers, defund the police. Defund the police? Really? You want to take money away from them? They're saying here in town that the Kansas City, Missouri police are going to lose $10 million. They're going to take away, what, $10 million, maybe even more. Now I'm doubting myself on that figure. I should have looked. I think it's 10. But why? Why are you going to take $10 million away from the police force? Why are you going to let these instigators and agitators have more reign than you're giving them right now? I mean, honest to God, I take my hat off to the police officers, because some of the videos I see from these protests, they're standing there taking every bit of shit that these entitled little brats want to give them. I'd have beat somebody with a nightstick by now. I'm serious. I couldn't do it. But see, that's where they're trained. That's where they are holding themselves and each other to the higher standards. Standards that I couldn't meet. No way, no how. Little punk gets in my face, wants to call me a racist or wants to call me a murderer. I saw this guy, I mean, he looked like he was a holdover from the 60s. He looked like a hippie who had not aged well. And he's there almost half naked for whatever reason. And he's getting in this black police officer's face. Now, the black police officer has his riot mask down. So this guy's like angling his head to be as close as he can to the cop's actual face. And he's saying things like he's going to murder his daughter and that he's going to do things to his wife. And that officer just had to stand there and take it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Hey, if you say anything about my daughters, it's on. Like, be ready to go. And honestly, I'm divorced. I'm not even married anymore. You still take a shot at my wife, ex or otherwise, and I'm going to be ready to go. So seriously, these police officers, you want to hold them to a higher standard? They're already meeting and exceeding that higher standard because they didn't beat that little punk into the ground, which is exactly what I should have done. Or not what I should have done, what I would have done. I don't have this almost saint-like patience that these officers showed in these situations and are still showing. Now, look, let me ask any of the rioters and agitators who are watching right now, and I know you're not, because you're probably out there causing trouble that doesn't need to be caused. But what's the end game? Okay? The actual movement of Black Lives Matter, I believe that as this movement grows and as they really start to get their voices heard, they're going to say, okay, here's what needs to change. This needs to change, that needs to change. And again, it's all decisions and things that are way above my pay grade. So I'm not even going to sit here and speculate. But I do think that it will come out like this is where we can all work together and where we can all, again, as I've said many times, fall forward together. I really think that that's coming. So let's ask the agitators and the rioters, what's your end game? This all started because of George Floyd, correct? So is it eye for an eye? Does one cop have to die per George Floyd? Okay, well, that already happened. That happened in abundance. There have been several police fatalities during this season of unrest. So what's your end game? How do we finally get you to go back to your mom's basement and jump back on Fortnite? Does anyone know? I actually have no idea. Like, I have no idea what they actually want or what ends this. Okay, I do believe that there is a plan from the people who actually want to see positive change throughout the country. There is no plan for these morons and dipshits who are tearing down statues of Ulysses S. Grant in the name of racism. What? The general that defeated the South, who later as president helped to get rid of slavery and free all the people in the South? Like, Lincoln started it, Grant kept it going. Like, the guy who actively fought against the KKK when it was developed, you're tearing down his statue? You're tearing down his statue. Are you sure about that? Seems like a terrible idea. Let's go to, the desecration of the memorial for the 54th Massachusetts. If you've seen the movie Glory, you know all about the 54th Massachusetts in the Civil War, the all-black regiment that fought in the North to free their brothers and sisters in the South. And you went and spray painted it. Really? Are you sure about that? There's no end game other than erasing history for these morons. And look, I'm torn because I absolutely agree with the old adage that if you don't learn from history, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I believe that's 100% correct. Because if you look right now, if you look at what we're doing to law enforcement, okay, it's the same damn thing that Nazi Germany did to law enforcement. You end law enforcement, you get rid of all the cops. That's when in Nazi Germany, the brown shirts took over and it paved the road for genocide. Is that what we're going for now? Really? You want to get rid of all the cops and what, have the security force from Chaz come and guard everything? Yeah, sign me up for that. No. So look, we have to learn from history. Now, does that mean we need a whole bunch of statues of Robert E. Lee still flying in the South? Well, that's for people smarter than me to decide. I don't like removing statues or history or things that we can use to learn from. Then on the other side of that, Robert E. Lee, main general of the Confederacy, not the most positive message to, drive by every day when you're going to work. It's like, oh, look, there's a guy that fought for slavery. Woohoo! I can understand not wanting that. So I am torn. I am torn from, I always think we need to keep and appreciate history and learn from it. I get it that some of these statues to the Confederacy, I mean, come on, they lost. We probably don't need to idealize them and their ideas. They lost. They were defeated. I get it. But we're taking it way too far when we're just trying to tear down every absolute statue that we can. And I think that's what's going on right now. They're aiming for everything because, well, it's there. So I'm going to go ahead and tear it down. There's some other ones, some people who, were staunchly against slavery and who helped to free the slaves, and their statues are getting torn down anyway because at this point they're not even really paying attention. It's like, oh, look, a statue. Oh, down it comes. Woo. Yeah. Seems like a dangerous precedent that we're setting. It's definitely not one that I agree with, and especially not in this mob mentality, torches and pitchforks kind of way that it's going about. If you want a statue removed, you can talk to the city. You can start talking to your senators and your congressmen, and you can maybe take strides to get it removed. But when you're just sitting there with your mob going out there and tearing down everything you can find, I'm not okay with that. But the long and short, look, there's no easy answers. And I said this on the last show. I don't have answers. I can't give you answers. I would love to give you answers because in my life, just the way I operate, I'm a fixer. I want to fix things. I would love to fix the race relations within this country. I would love to fix the relationship between the Black community and law enforcement. I'd love to be able to do all those things. And if I could effectively do all those things, I'd make a heck of a lot more money than I do now. Right? So look, I like I said, I'm for law enforcement. Okay. We need them. I've gotten my fair share of tickets. I've met my fair share of jerk cops, and I've met my fair share of wonderful cops. I know cops. I'm not a black man. I've not had the same experiences, and I'll freely admit that. But I still will maintain that 99% of all police are good. And that's just across the board. 99% of police, 99% of whites, 99% of blacks, 99% of Hispanics, 99% of Indians. Ultimately, people are good. Unfortunately, right now, what we're seeing is a society that wants to shine the big, bright spotlight on the bad. And so that's what everyone sees. And when that's all that you see, and that's everything that you see, then that's what you ultimately believe to be true. And ultimately believing to be true that all cops are bad, or that all white people are racist, or that all blacks are whatever you want to throw on it, when we ultimately see that that's all there is and that's all we believe, we never, again, come together. And it's all about falling forward together. As always, I welcome your feedback on this particular episode or any of the other ones, the one that I did last week on the Black Lives Matter movement. These are difficult times. Coronavirus is still out there. It's still a thing. Life is not back to normal. And so I think between that and the civil unrest, we are really living in difficult times. But instead of going nuts about it, instead of hating each other and, people just ripping each other up and down on social media, let's come together and let's talk about things, reasonably, respectfully, and, see if we can't find a little peace within ourselves. Because trust me, we're in a voting cycle, folks. You're not going to find the peace that we want on the news. You're not going to find it in mainstream media. Okay, mainstream media is absolutely a disaster. It really is. And it's leading to 85% of the problems that we all have right now. It's being caused and fed like a fire by the media who just want their ratings. If you go outside and you talk to your neighbors, you talk to your friends, you talk to the people in your life, you're going to see that things aren't that bad. And they're really not. Changes need to be made. And you know what? Let's come together and let's make those changes. Let's make those changes together, not as black, not as white, not as Hispanic, not as Christian, not as Jewish, not as atheist, but as Americans, as U.S. citizens, as, you know, a people, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Let's come together as that and then try and move forward together, because we're all in this together. Every single one of us, black, white, cop, and everywhere in between. So I'll stop repeating myself. Thank you so much for joining me for this particular episode. You can find everything on hittingthewallpodcast.com. Please donate to Patreon if you like what we're doing, so we can expand, so we can get more of the word out. And then like, share, comment on this post, and let's see if we can't really get some people talking and hopefully, again, falling forward together. Have a good night, everybody.